The conference room had that sterile brightness that makes everything feel exposed. 14 faces on the Zoom grid. 6 executives around the table. And me mid-sentence, explaining why the timeline Bruce proposed would fail. If we push the data migration to week 3 without buffer time. Megan. Bruce's voice cut through the air like a blade. I think we need to talk about professionalism. The room went silent. Not the natural pause of conversation, but the kind of silence that swallows oxygen. My face burned hot. Every eye turned toward me. This emotional reactivity isn't helpful, he continued, leaning back in his chair with practiced authority. We need team players who can handle pressure without becoming unprofessional. I felt my hands grip the edge of the table. The client representatives on Zoom had frozen mid-note. Our VP of Operations, Patricia Hughes, glanced at her phone. Nobody defended me. Nobody asked for clarification. Bruce smiled slightly, that expression he wore when he'd landed a point. He moved on to the next agenda item like nothing had happened. I didn't speak again for the rest of the meeting. I just sat there, nodding when appropriate, while something cold and clear settled in my chest. When the meeting ended, I walked back to my desk, opened my notebook and wrote 4 words. Let it play out. The aftermath was worse than the accusation. Kyle from finance, who usually joked with me about coffee quality, suddenly found his keyboard fascinating when I passed his desk. Amanda from client services, who'd asked me for help just yesterday, took the long route to the break room to avoid crossing my path. Bruce stood by the water cooler with 2 junior managers, laughing about something. He saw me and his smile widened just slightly. Victory smile. The kind that said he'd won something. I poured my coffee in silence. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody said the meeting had been unfair. They'd all made their choice the moment Bruce spoke, and that choice was to not choose me. Back at my desk, I opened my email and looked at the chain from 3 months ago. The one where Bruce had written, Megan's work here is invaluable. Don't know what we'd do without her. Private praise. Never public. Clicked reply, then stopped. Fighting back meant engaging. Defending meant accepting that his accusation deserved a response. Instead, I opened a blank document and titled it, Project Phoenix Documentation. Phoenix was the renewal contract everyone was terrified of losing. The one that determined our department's entire future. The one Bruce supposedly owned. The one I'd actually built from broken pieces nobody else wanted to touch. I started typing. Not accusations. Just facts. 6 months earlier, I hadn't wanted Project Phoenix at all. It landed on my desk on a Thursday afternoon when Bruce called me into his office with that expression he wore when he needed something. Megan, I need someone detail-oriented on this. Someone I trust. Translation. Someone who won't complain when it turns out to be a disaster. Phoenix was the company's contract renewal with Dalton Industries, our largest client. The previous account manager had quit suddenly, leaving behind corrupted files, missing documentation, and a client relationship held together with apology emails. How long do I have? Task. 4 months to full renewal. But honestly, Bruce lowered his voice. Just keep them from leaving. If you can do that, you're a miracle worker. I wasn't a miracle worker. I was just someone who showed up at 7 in the morning and stayed until the problems were solved. I rebuilt the client database from email archives. I tracked down contracts from 3 departments. I created a project timeline that actually made sense. Bruce would stop by my desk sometimes. How's Phoenix treating you? Always casual. Always in passing. Never in meetings where it mattered. Getting there, I'd say. That's my girl, he'd reply, already walking away. Hated that phrase. But I kept working. The pattern started small. In a leadership meeting I wasn't invited to, Bruce presented his strategy for Phoenix. I heard about it from Kyle, who'd been taking notes. Your timeline was brilliant, he said. Bruce really sold it. My timeline. Bruce's presentation. A week later, I suggested we implement automated reporting to reduce client complaints. Bruce nodded thoughtfully. 3 days later, in front of the VP, he announced his plan to modernize our reporting system. My idea. His announcement. I started noticing the meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Strategy sessions, client calls, budget reviews. All the places where Phoenix was discussed, decided, celebrated. I'd get the notes afterward, sometimes hours late, with my name absent from every summary. When I did attend meetings, Bruce had a new habit. He'd start with, "Let me clarify what Megan means," and then rephrase my exact words. Not better, just in his voice. The team learned to wait for his translation. My actual statements became background noise. I should have seen it then. He wasn't borrowing my credibility. He was replacing me with himself, one meeting at a time. By the time anyone looked up, I'd be a ghost who used to work here. The insult in the conference room wasn't spontaneous. It was the final brick in a wall he'd been building for months. Project Phoenix wasn't just important. It was existential. Dalton Industries represented 40% of our department's annual revenue. Losing them meant layoffs, restructuring, maybe dissolution. Bruce had inherited the relationship when his predecessor left, and he wore that inheritance like a crown. "We've got momentum," he'd told Patricia in the hallway last month. I'd been walking past with client files. "Phoenix is solid. I've rebuilt that relationship from the ground up." Kept walking. Arguing would have made me look petty. Documentation didn't require an audience. The truth was Phoenix had 17 critical dependencies, 8 of which only I fully understood. The data migration required specific sequencing or the entire client portal would crash. The contract language had been negotiated across 4 departments, and I was the only person who knew which clauses contradicted each other. Bruce understood the surface. He could present the vision, charm the executives, promise results. But the infrastructure, the actual machinery that made Phoenix work, that was mine. And I'd been so good at making it look easy that nobody realized it was hard. After the meeting, after he called me unprofessional, I sat at my desk and looked at my Phoenix files. Hundreds of hours of work. Problem solving that had kept me up at night. Solutions nobody else had thought to attempt. If I stepped back even slightly, the whole thing would crack. And I was about to step way, way back. The change was invisible at first. I stopped doing the things I'd never been asked to do officially. No more checking the client portal at night to make sure uploads completed. No more reminding Bruce about follow-ups he'd forgotten. No more fixing small errors before they became large problems. I still did my assigned work. I still met every deadline on my task list. But the invisible scaffolding I'd built around everyone else's mistakes, that quietly disappeared. On Tuesday, Kyle emailed me about a data discrepancy. Normally, I would have fixed it immediately and sent him the corrected file with a friendly note. This time I replied, "That's outside my current assignment. You might want to check with Bruce about the correct process." Kyle didn't respond. On Wednesday, Amanda pinged me on Slack asking if I could just quickly review a client proposal. I used to do it without thinking. Now I wrote back, "I'm at capacity with my assigned projects. Bruce can probably recommend someone." The cracks were small, barely noticeable, but they were forming. And Bruce, comfortable in his victory, didn't notice at all. By the end of the week, Bruce was thriving. He'd started making jokes in meetings, little comments about emotional reactions, and staying professional under pressure. Never my name, never direct, just enough that everyone knew who he meant. Patricia laughed once. That hurt more than Bruce's insults. I sat in those meetings taking notes with the same calm expression I always wore. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself. I just wrote everything down. Meeting date. Who attended. What was said. Bruce grew bolder. In a Friday afternoon check-in, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Some people just aren't built for high-stakes environments. That's okay. We all have different strengths." He was talking to the room but looking at me. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Amanda studied her laptop screen. Nobody spoke up. I nodded slightly as if agreeing. Bruce's smile widened. He thought my silence meant surrender. He thought he'd won, that I'd accepted my place in his hierarchy. What he didn't know was that every dismissive comment, every public slight, was another line in my documentation file. Every witness to his confidence was another person who'd remember later what he'd claimed he could do alone. Let him get comfortable. Comfortable people make careless mistakes. I started confirming everything in writing. When Bruce verbally assigned me a task, I'd send a follow-up email. Per our conversation, you've asked me to complete X by Y date. Please confirm this is accurate. He'd reply with a quick yep or sounds good, not reading carefully. When someone asked me to cover work outside my scope, I'd reply professionally. I want to make sure I'm prioritizing correctly. Could you confirm with Bruce that this is my responsibility? Most of the time they didn't follow up. They just handle it themselves or let it slide. I created a shared project folder with every Phoenix document I'd ever created. I titled them clearly, Client Communication Log, maintained by M. Whitfield, and Data Migration Sequence, created by M. Whitfield. Bruce approved access without looking at the contents. Why would he? He thought it was just administrative housekeeping. What he didn't realize was that I was building a record. Not of his failures. Of my boundaries. Every email was a timestamp proving I'd only done what I was explicitly assigned. Every labeled document showed exactly who'd built what. I wasn't planning to accuse him of anything. I was planning to let the absence of my unassigned work speak for itself. The first rail crack appeared in week 2. Kyle approached my desk looking stressed. Hey, the Dalton data pull isn't matching the contract terms. Can you? That's not in my current assignment scope, I said gently. Bruce is the Phoenix lead. He can help you resolve it. Kyle blinked. But you always. I did, I agreed. When I was handling those tasks. Right now, my focus is on the documentation I've been assigned. He walked away confused. An hour later, I saw him at Bruce's desk. Bruce waved him off. Just do your best estimate. We'll adjust later. No adjustment was possible. The data pull had to match the contract terms exactly, or the client portal would reject the upload. But that was no longer my problem to solve. By Thursday, Amanda was asking about approval workflows. Didn't you set up the sequence for client sign-offs? I documented what existed, I said. Implementation is Bruce's call. She frowned. But he said you'd know how to. I'm happy to answer questions about documentation I created. But process decisions are above my level. That was technically true. I'd never been promoted to lead. I'd just been doing lead-level work without the title or the pay. By Friday, the Phoenix timeline had slipped by 3 days. Small enough that nobody panicked. Large enough that I noticed. And I said nothing. I decided to give Bruce one last warning. Not because I wanted to save him. Because I wanted documentation that I'd tried. I spent Saturday morning writing an email. Professional. Unemotional. Specific. Bruce, as we approach the Phoenix deadline, I wanted to flag some gaps that may need attention. 1. Data migration sequencing requires validation before client testing. 2. Contract terms in sections 4.7 and 6.2 have conflicting approval workflows. 3. Client portal access roles haven't been updated since the July security patch. I listed 8 specific risks. Each one was something I used to handle quietly. Each one was now formally his problem. I hit send Sunday evening. Monday morning, Bruce replied. Thanks for the input. We've got this under control. Focus on your assigned tasks. That was it. 14 words dismissing 8 critical risks. I forwarded his response to my personal email. Then I printed both messages and filed them in the folder at home where I kept everything related to this job that might matter later. Bruce had just signed off on his own failure. In writing. With a timestamp. And when it all fell apart, nobody could say I hadn't warned him. The second public humiliation happened in the weekly leadership meeting. I was presenting a status update on the documentation portion of Phoenix. My assigned work. I just explained that all files were current when Bruce interrupted. Let's hear from someone closer to the operational work, he said smoothly. Kyle, can you give us the real ground-level view? Kyle looked uncomfortable. Megan handles most of the operational detail, actually. I'm sure she does administrative work, Bruce said, not unkindly. Just condescendingly. But strategy-wise, you're closer to execution. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Kyle handled data entry. I'd built the entire system he entered data into. But I didn't correct Bruce. I just closed my laptop quietly and sat back in my chair. Patricia glanced at me, then away quickly. Amanda studied the table. Nobody said. Actually, Megan designed that entire process. When the meeting ended, I walked back to my desk and felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger anymore. Not even hurt. Just a clean, clear detachment. I didn't care if Bruce took credit. I didn't care if the team believed his version. Because in 3 weeks, when the deadline hit, the truth wouldn't need my defense. The work would speak. Or more precisely, the absence of my work would scream. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Megan Whitfield. The voice was warm, professional. This is Jordan Beck from Titan Point Solutions. Casey Lynn spoke very highly of you. We're looking for someone with your systems background. Casey, my old colleague from 2 jobs ago. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. I'm currently employed, I said carefully. I understand. But if you're open to a conversation, we'd love to talk. We're building a new operations division, and frankly, Casey said you're the best systems thinker she's ever worked with. We talked for 20 minutes. By the end, Jordan had sent me a preliminary offer. Senior Operations Manager, 20% salary increase, full remote flexibility, and actual decision-making authority. Think it over, Jordan said. No pressure. But if you're interested, we move quickly. I hung up and stared at my computer screen. At the Phoenix files I'd built. At the project Bruce claimed as his. At the deadline approaching like a freight train. I opened my calendar and counted days. 3 weeks until Phoenix finalization. 2 weeks minimum for professional notice. The timing was perfect. Almost poetically so. I didn't accept immediately. Not because I wasn't sure. But because the offer was leverage. And leverage was most powerful when used precisely. I saved Jordan's email in a folder titled Future. Then I went back to work like nothing had changed. I gave notice on a Thursday morning. Professional. Polite. Exactly 2 weeks as required by company policy. I scheduled a meeting with Bruce and Patricia together. Witnesses mattered. I've accepted another position, I said calmly. My last day will be the 18th. Bruce's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Calculation. Performance. Wow, he said, leaning back with forced casualness. That's sudden. Everything okay? Everything's fine. It's a good opportunity. Patricia frowned. The 18th is cutting it close to Phoenix finalization. My assigned documentation is complete, I said. I'm happy to do a knowledge transfer for anything specific. Of course, Bruce said quickly. Too quickly. We appreciate everything you've done. Really. We'll miss having you. He was already calculating. I could see it in his eyes. 2 weeks. Could he extract what he needed from me in 2 weeks? I'll put together transition notes, I offered. That would be great, Bruce said. Still smiling. Still confident. He thought I'd still cover for him. Still fix things. Still carry the weight I'd always carried because that's what I did. He had no idea I'd been putting down that weight for 3 weeks already. And in 2 more weeks, I'd be gone completely. The deadline would still be there. But I wouldn't. Bruce assigned Kyle to shadow me for knowledge transfer. Just walk him through Phoenix, Bruce said in the handoff meeting. High level is fine. He's a quick learner. High level. Those 2 words gave me permission to do exactly what he asked and nothing more. I spent 3 days with Kyle going through documentation. I showed him where files lived. I explained the naming conventions. I walked him through the status dashboard I'd created. This is really complex, Kyle said on day 2, looking overwhelmed. It's detailed, I agreed. But everything's documented. What if something breaks? Then you follow the troubleshooting guide in the shared folder. Section 7. Kyle looked at the guide. 40 pages of technical process maps. He'd never read it. I knew he wouldn't. But I'd done what I was asked. I never said, "Here's the thing nobody documented but everyone needs to know." I never shared the mental shortcuts I'd developed over months. I never explained which client contacts actually made decisions versus which ones just seemed important. I gave Kyle exactly what Bruce asked for. High-level process overview. What I didn't give him was judgment, intuition, or the 1,000 small decisions I made daily that kept Phoenix running smoothly. Those things couldn't be documented. They had to be earned through experience. Experience Kyle didn't have and wouldn't get in time. Behind closed doors, panic was starting to build. I heard it in the voices during Bruce's phone calls. Sharper. More frequent. I saw it in Patricia's expression when she passed my desk. A tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. In the leadership meeting that Friday, Patricia asked Bruce directly, "Are we confident Phoenix transitions smoothly after Megan leaves?" "Absolutely," Bruce said. "Megan's been great about documenting everything. Kyle's up to speed. We're in good shape." Technically true. Dangerously misleading. Kyle had the documentation. But documentation was like having a map versus knowing the terrain. You could read that a river was deep, but until you tried to cross it yourself, you didn't know where the current would drag you. After the meeting, I saw Bruce pull Kyle aside. Their conversation was too quiet to hear, but Kyle's face said everything. He looked terrified. "You've got this," Bruce said, loud enough for me to catch. Confident. Reassuring. Kyle nodded, but his hands were shaking slightly when he walked away. I felt a small pang of sympathy. Kyle wasn't the villain here. He was just another person Bruce would blame when things fell apart. But I couldn't save Kyle any more than I could save Phoenix. I tried to save things for too long already. Now I was just completing my 2 weeks and walking away clean. Whatever happened after the 18th was no longer my problem. The cracks became fractures in my final week. Client email came in Tuesday morning with questions about contract terms. Normally I would have answered within an hour. Now I forwarded it to Bruce. Client question for the Phoenix lead. He forwarded it to Kyle with, "Can you handle this?" Kyle didn't know the answer. He spent 3 hours searching documentation before finally responding with something technically accurate but missing the context the client actually needed. The client wrote back confused. Bruce had to call them personally to smooth it over. Wednesday, the data migration test failed. The error code meant nothing to Kyle. I saw him at his desk frantically Googling. Bruce walked by, saw Kyle's screen and said, "Just restart it. Should be fine." It wasn't fine. Restarting it meant rerunning a 6-hour process. They'd lose a day. I said nothing. It wasn't my project anymore. Thursday, Patricia stopped by my desk. "Megan, quick question about the approval workflows. Bruce is the Phoenix lead," I said gently. "He'll have the most current information." Her jaw tightened. "Right. Of course." She walked away, and I knew she just realized something was wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Not yet. Just wrong enough that the confident assurances Bruce had been giving suddenly felt hollow. By Friday, Bruce was working late. I saw the light under his door when I left at 5:30. For the first time in 6 months, he looked stressed. The call came Saturday night. I was at home, halfway through a movie, when my phone lit up. "Bruce." I let it ring twice before answering. "Megan, hey." His voice was casual but tight. "Sorry to bother you on the weekend. Quick question about Phoenix." "Not quick. Never quick. I'm no longer assigned to that project," I said calmly. I know. Just, there's a client portal issue, and I can't find the documentation about the July security patch you mentioned. Could you just point me to the right file?" It would take me 30 seconds. Old Megan would have done it without thinking. New Megan said. All Phoenix documentation is in the shared folder I set up. The security patch notes should be in the July subfolder. I've looked there. I can't find. Then it may not have been documented separately. The security team might have those records. Silence. He was realizing I wasn't going to help. Megan. His voice changed. Harder. I need you to work with me here. This is important. I understand. But I'm no longer on the Phoenix team. Kyle is handling operational questions. And you're the strategic lead. I'm sure you'll figure it out. We had a good working relationship, Bruce said, trying a different angle. I'd hate for this to end badly. It's not ending badly, I said. I completed my assigned work, provided documentation, and gave proper notice. I hope Phoenix goes well. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. From the adrenaline of finally saying no to someone who'd expected me to say yes forever. I turned my phone off and went back to my movie. Monday morning, Bruce tried to rewrite the narrative. I wasn't in the meeting. I was at my desk, packing my personal items into a cardboard box. But Amanda told me about it later, looking uncomfortable. Bruce said you'd left them short-staffed, Amanda said quietly. That the Phoenix transition was harder because you'd been, quote, resistant to knowledge sharing. I stopped packing. Did he show the transition documentation I created? No. He just said you'd been difficult lately. Did anyone ask to see the emails where I confirmed everything in writing? Amanda shook her head. Interesting, I said. That afternoon, Patricia called me into her office. She looked tired. Megan, I'm hearing some concerning things about the Phoenix handoff. Bruce says there are gaps in documentation. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Would you like to see the transition plan I sent Bruce on my second day of notice? Or the documentation folder I created and shared with the team? Or the emails confirming which tasks were my responsibility? Patricia's expression changed. Send those to me. Of course. I forwarded everything. Every email confirmation. Every task assignment. Every boundary I'd set in writing. Every warning I'd sent that Bruce had dismissed. The paper trail was immaculate. Professional. Unemotional. Just facts and timestamps. Patricia read in silence. When she looked up, her face was carefully neutral. Thank you. This is helpful context. I left her office knowing Bruce's narrative had just hit a wall made of my own documentation. The deadline was 5 days away when the real collapse started. I was finishing my last week, doing exit interviews and returning equipment, when I saw Bruce's office door closed with Patricia and 2 other executives inside. Their voices were low but urgent. Kyle sat at his desk looking pale. When he saw me, he looked away quickly. Guilty. By Wednesday, the whispers started. Project delays. Client concerns. Bruce working until midnight trying to patch problems he didn't fully understand. Amanda approached my desk cautiously. Was Phoenix always this complicated? Yes, I said simply. Bruce made it sound straightforward. It looked straightforward when someone was handling the complicated parts quietly. She understood. I could see it in her eyes. The realization that all those times Bruce had confidently dismissed concerns. He'd been relying on me to make his confidence justified. Thursday afternoon, Patricia called another meeting. This time I was included. So was Bruce, Kyle, and 2 executives I'd never met with before. Walk us through the Phoenix timeline, one executive said to Bruce. Bruce did his best. He talked about strategy, relationships, deliverables. All surface level. All true. All missing the actual infrastructure. What about the data migration sequence Megan mentioned in her email? Patricia asked, pulling up her laptop. Bruce hesitated. Kyle's handling that. Kyle, the executive turned to him. Can you explain the sequence? Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear. It's in the documentation. The process is complex. I'm still learning. Megan. Patricia looked at me directly. Can you explain it? Could I could walk them through every dependency, every risk, every solution. I could save Phoenix right now with 20 minutes of explanation. But I wasn't paid to save Phoenix anymore. I wasn't even employed here anymore. I documented the process in the shared folder, I said calmly. Everything I knew is in there. But could you? The executive started. I'm no longer on this project, I said. Not rudely, just factually. My last day is tomorrow. They offered me a retention package that afternoon. Patricia called me into her office alone. Megan, we need to talk about Phoenix. We're prepared to offer you a significant retention bonus if you'll stay through the deadline. Name your number. I almost laughed. 6 months ago, I would have done anything to hear those words. To be valued. To be necessary. Now they felt hollow. I appreciate the offer, I said. But I've already committed to my new position. They're expecting me Monday. We could match their salary. Exceed it, even. This isn't about money, Patricia. Then what is it about? I looked at her directly. Bruce called me unprofessional in front of clients and executives. He took credit for my work for months. He dismissed my concerns. And when I set boundaries, he told leadership I was being difficult. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I didn't know the extent of. You were in the meeting when he said it. Everyone was. You didn't defend yourself. I shouldn't have had to. Patricia looked down. You're right. What would it take for you to reconsider? Nothing, I said simply. I'm done. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in a year. Friday was my last day. I came in, returned my badge and laptop, and said polite goodbyes. Bruce wasn't at his desk. Nobody mentioned Phoenix. At 4:30, Patricia stopped by my desk one final time. The Phoenix deadline is Monday. If there's anything. Kyle has all the documentation, I said. Bruce is the strategic lead. They'll figure it out. I didn't say what we both knew. They wouldn't figure it out. Not in time. At 5 o'clock, I walked out of the building for the last time. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and gold. My phone buzzed with messages from old coworkers wishing me luck. Nothing from Bruce. Monday morning I started my new job. Titan Point Solutions had a bright, modern office with a team that listened when I talked. Jordan introduced me to everyone as the systems expert we've been waiting for. Nobody interrupted me. Nobody took credit. Nobody called me unprofessional. Tuesday afternoon, my personal phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was Bruce. His voice was quiet, defeated. Megan. Hey, I need to talk to you. About how things ended. I think maybe I didn't. Look, could you call me back? Please. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. Wednesday, Casey texted me. Heard your old company missed a major deadline. You okay? Smiled. I'm great, actually. I heard the full story from Amanda 3 weeks later. We met for coffee at her request. She looked tired but determined. Phoenix fell apart, she said without preamble. The deadline was missed by 4 days. Client wasn't happy. Board got involved. What happened to Bruce? He wasn't fired. Worse, he was transitioned to a senior analyst role. No team. No authority. Just reports and spreadsheets. The image of Bruce, who'd built his identity on leading people, sitting alone at a desk running numbers, was more satisfying than any dramatic firing would have been. Patricia was asked to explain what happened, Amanda continued. She pulled your emails. All of them. The warnings you sent. The documentation you created. The transition plan Bruce ignored. And leadership realized Bruce had been taking credit for your work for months. They asked why nobody had flagged it sooner. Amanda looked down. Including me. I should have said something. In that first meeting when he called you unprofessional, I should have spoken up. It wouldn't have mattered, I said gently. Maybe not. But I still should have tried. We talked for another hour. About boundaries. About speaking up. About the cost of staying quiet when someone's being treated unfairly. When we hugged goodbye, Amanda said, "You handled that whole thing better than anyone I've ever seen. You didn't scream. You didn't burn bridges. You just walked away clean." "I let the deadline speak for me," I said. Turns out it was pretty articulate. Bruce reached out one more time. An email this time. Long, rambling. Defensive. "I never meant to undermine you. I was under a lot of pressure. Leadership was demanding results and I did what I thought I had to do. I know things got tense, but I never intended to hurt you professionally. I hope you understand it wasn't personal. We made a good team and I'm sorry it ended this way. I wish you'd given me a chance to make things right before leaving." I read it twice. Closed the email. Never responded. He wanted absolution I wasn't interested in giving. He wanted me to say it was okay, that I understood that we could part as friends who just had a professional disagreement. But it wasn't a disagreement. It was a pattern of disrespect he'd chosen deliberately. And I didn't owe him forgiveness just because he was finally experiencing consequences. I deleted the email and went back to work. Titan Point, I was building something new. A system I designed from scratch, with my name on it, with proper credit and proper authority. Nobody questioned my professionalism. Nobody interrupted my explanations. Nobody translated my words into their voice. 3 months in, Jordan called me into her office. "We're promoting you to Director of Operations. You've earned it. Not, you're valuable," said privately in a hallway. Not credit given to someone else in public. Just clear, direct recognition. Accepted. A year later, I ran into Kyle at a professional conference. He looked different. Older somehow. Less anxious. "Megan." He seemed genuinely glad to see me. "How are you?" "Good. Really good." "You?" "Better now. I left 6 months ago." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "I want to apologize. For Phoenix. For not speaking up when Bruce. You were in an impossible position," I said. "Maybe. But I watched him take credit for your work. I watched him humiliate you in meetings. And I said nothing because I was scared of becoming his next target." Kyle looked down. "After you left and everything fell apart, I realized something. Staying quiet to avoid being a target just meant I was part of the problem." "What made you leave?" "I didn't want to become him. Bruce, I mean. I saw how easy it would be to slip into that same pattern. Take credit. Protect yourself. Throw someone else under the bus when it gets hard." He met my eyes. "I didn't want that." We talked for a while longer. About new jobs, better teams, lessons learned the hard way. When we parted, Kyle said, "You handled that whole situation with more grace than I've ever seen. You could have burned everything down. Instead, you just stepped back and let the truth speak for itself." "The deadline did the talking," I said. "I just got out of its way." Sometimes I think about that conference room. The moment Bruce called me unprofessional. The silence that followed. In that moment, I could have defended myself loudly. I could have argued, listed my accomplishments, demanded an apology. Maybe some people would have respected that. But I chose silence. Not because I was weak. Because I knew something Bruce didn't. My value wasn't determined by his opinion. My work existed independently of his recognition. And the deadline approaching was more honest than any argument I could have made. The best revenge wasn't screaming or scheming or sabotage. It was simply stopping. Stopping the unpaid labor. Stopping the invisible scaffolding. Stopping the rescue operations that made his incompetence look like leadership. I didn't destroy Bruce. I just let him stand on his own, without my foundation beneath him. And when the ground gave way, it gave way because there was nothing holding it up. People ask sometimes if I regret not fighting back harder. If I wish I'd confronted him publicly or exposed him more dramatically. I don't. Because I got something better than revenge. Got free. I'm a director now at a company that values me. I lead a team that respects me. I make decisions that matter, with my name attached with proper credit. And somewhere across town, Bruce sits at a desk with no authority, running reports nobody reads, learning slowly what it feels like to be invisible. The deadline spoke, and everyone heard it. I just had to be quiet enough to let it.